September 28, 30, 1918. Asterisk. What does it feel like to crawl through a field where the earth itself seems alive, heaving with shell bursts, screaming with torn wire, and breathing poison gas, knowing that every shadow may be the last thing you ever see? In those final weeks of World War I, on the broken ground near the Vesle River at Bazachezet St. Thibaut, by the haunted slopes of the Chemin des Dames, U.S. Army Sergeant William Shemin of Company G. 47th Infantry Regiment, 4th Division, stepped into a nightmare that would test the absolute limits of human endurance and moral courage. A nightmare where the rules of survival were rewritten by machine gun fire, and courage had to be louder than fear. Because Shemin was not merely a rifleman advancing with his unit, but a soldier who, when the advance collapsed into chaos, became a lifeline under fire. A man who repeatedly left the thin safety of shell holes to drag screaming, bleeding comrades back from no man's land, while German machine guns stitched the ground around him, each burst ripping the air like a saw, the smell of cordite mixing with mud and blood. And this was not a single impulsive act, but a relentless pattern over 3 days in which Shemin moved forward and back again and again, shoulders burning, hands slick, boots filling with cold mud as wounded men clutched at him in shock, some begging not to be left, others already silent with eyes open. And when the company's officers were cut down in the storm of fire and confusion, command did not formally pass with a salute or an order, but with necessity. And Shemin took it upon himself to rally what remained, organizing the defense, redistributing ammunition. And then, when the enemy pressed close enough that the metallic clatter of their weapons sounded like insects at the ear, leading a bayonet charge to push them back, a moment of brutal, intimate violence where faces flashed in smoke and the fear was so thick it tasted like iron. And even after shrapnel tore into his back and he was wounded, Shemin refused evacuation, continuing to lead until his strength finally failed. Because in that place courage was not cinematic but exhausting, a grinding decision made second by second while artillery thundered like an unending funeral drum. The horror of those days lingered in details soldiers carried forever, the cries of men trapped in wire at night, the sudden stillness after a barrage when the silence itself felt predatory, the sight of bodies half buried by explosions, so that the ground seemed to be made of men. And yet within that horror Shemin's actions stood out for their clarity of purpose, for the way he treated each wounded soldier as a responsibility that outweighed his own life, embodying a quiet heroism that asked nothing in return. And when the war ended and medals were handed out, his recommendation vanished into the machinery of history, lost in a time when recognition was not equally given, and some valor waited longer than others to be named. So Shemin returned home with memories instead of honors, carrying the weight of what he had seen and done, while the fields of France slowly healed over the scars of trenches and graves. And for nearly a century his story slept in archives until a review of records finally corrected the silence. And in 2015, the Medal of Honor was awarded posthumously to acknowledge what had always been true, that on those September days in 1918, amid classified-level chaos, where communication broke down and survival depended on individual resolve, William Shemin had repeatedly and voluntarily risked his life above and beyond the call of duty. Not once but persistently, in conditions designed to break men, conditions where fear was constant and death arbitrary, and the recognition, though delayed, did not change the past but illuminated it, turning a forgotten figure back into a human being whose courage could be measured not only in actions, but in the cost he paid in wounds and memories. And as we revisit those moments now, imagining the flicker of flares over the vessel, the choking gas drifting low, the wounded calling out in the dark, while one man kept moving toward them despite every instinct screaming to hide, we are forced to confront a deeper question about war and memory, about how many acts of quiet heroism remain buried under mud and time, and whether the true horror is not only what men like Shemin endured in battle, but how long it can take for the world to fully see them. So when you think of that medic-like courage under fire, that leadership born in chaos, And that long road from the shell-torn fields of France to a medal awarded 100 years later, ask yourself this: if you had been there, with death clawing at the dark and duty pulling you forward, would you have had the strength to stand up, step into the gunfire, and become the reason others lived?